I'll be going over my skill build for Aegis Fighter from the beta. So a little bit about the skill system in Blue Protocol. You get 146 total skill points at max level 35, and as you can see in my build, you cannot max everything out. There are only 4 action skills you can place, and there are 2 sets that every class gets. Every main upgrade to the skill either lets you press the skill twice or gives it some kind of effect. The Aegis Fighter gets a tanking-like skill set and a DPS one. There are then 3 ability slots you can activate, which are defined here, and also in each skill there are 2 abilities here. Then traits are over here, and you can spec into as much as your skill points allow. I heavily went into DPS as I played alone 3/4 of the entire beta, so I swapped out one skill sometimes here. Now onto my build. Skill 1 is a shield bash. This one stuns a mob with physical damage, and the other one does light AoE damage on impact. Personally, I like to just have the stun one all the time, but if there's already another Aegis Fighter in the party with stun, it's better you put it on the light damage one. Next is your AoE circle damage. This one is a taunt with physical damage. The other one is light damage, which is what I left it on. Then we have your ranged attack. The top one is a penetrating physical attack, so it can damage multiple enemies at a distance. The other one is a physical light slash that can slash multiple enemies up close. The last skill I had spec'd into was a self-healing regen skill, which healed me roughly 10%. The other skill is defense up. Next are my abilities. Initially, I had went with old cooldown decrease ability, but it was only a 7-second decrease at max level, so I swapped it to my shield rate gauge recovering faster. The next ability I spec'd was my light slash second ability, which was damage increase. I went with this since it is my hardest hitting skill, excluding my ult. It increased the damage by about 33%. The last ability I went with was this one, which increases the range of your dodge roll. This was pretty useful since as an Aegis Fighter you cannot block indefinitely, and it's good for getting out of range of telegraphed attacks. It's also good as a gap closer for when you don't want to sheath your weapon. Overall, abilities felt very limiting since the skill augments were also a part of the selection of your regular abilities. There are a lot of good ability augments on the skills, but at the same time, the regular abilities are also essential. It might be less restricting if ability slots are increased to maybe 5. Something like this healing skill augment could really help with tanking as it recovers shield gauge, meaning you can weave it in between block counters while tanking. But with only 3 slots, as a tank, you would want these 3 abilities instead since they help greatly with tanking. This one increases the dodge roll range, this one decreases the shield gauge consumption rate, and this one increases the speed of shield gauge recovery. Now let's go over my traits. This was pretty straightforward. I actually did dexterity last because I had points left over. For base stats, I went with strength, vitality, and HP. For regular stats, I went with all of the ones here, which are attack, healing, defense, and crit. Here's a quick showcase of all 8 skills for the Aegis Fighter. Next, let's go on to basic attacks. Using attack lets you combo up to 4 times. Leveling up your basic attack skill to 2, you'll get a light thrust. This is activated by holding W after your second combo. Leveling up your basic attack skill to 3, you'll get a small shield attack that gives you defense up. This is activated by holding S after your first combo. Every class gets an ultimate skill, which is called ult, and for Aegis Fighter it does a lot of damage. I usually pair it up with one of my imagines that gives me attack up, which makes me deal even more damage. Using ult also gives you a long iframe, and we'll talk about iframes next. There is a really lenient iframe duration in this game, and from what I've heard, they've increased it since the last beta. This is important for Aegis Fighter as we can't block continuously. Sometimes you'll want to dodge roll instead of block to maintain your shield gauge. Dodge rolling also cancels almost any animation you do, so if you try to counter and the boss doesn't attack, you can dodge roll to get rid of that standstill animation. Animation canceling. We'll get into blocking and countering next. As an Aegis fighter, you have a shield gauge, and it is consumed when trying to counter or when blocking. The amount of damage you receive seems to affect how much of your shield gauge goes down, so there might be an optimal amount of defense you should have later on. It does not go down when holding block, and you can also move around while blocking. Once the gauge hits 0, you lose your shield temporarily, which is when you should be using your regular dodge roll to evade attacks. Also, countering with almost 0 gauge does not break your shield. Recovering gauge is pretty much not using your shield for a certain amount of time. If you're a Terra Lancer, you might have thought about quick blocking like I did. Unfortunately, it is not efficient to quick block for 2 reasons. Your shield gauge does not go down while blocking, and you can move while blocking. Counter is a skill that is used by clicking the attack button while blocking. When successful, it'll deliver an attack back, and when not successful, it'll leave you feeling empty inside. But like I said before, you can animation cancel out of the long standstill you do when countering. The skill is pretty lenient, as monsters can attack when your counter animation is almost over, and it'll still proc. Countering lets you stagger a monster, which interrupts any action it does, so this is useful for bosses that are staggerable like in this clip. Just be careful of bosses that have a phase where they go crazy, since you'll lose all of your gauge quickly when panicking and blocking everything it does. A nice animation cancelling move to do is gap closing with a regular attack, and then cancelling its animation at the end with block. This lets you gap close efficiently without needing to sheath your weapon. But you can also sheath your weapon even during combat by pressing shift and running up to the monster. That about covers most of what I know about Aegis Fighter from the beta. Let me know down in the comments if there's anything I missed.